Hi, welcome to our project. We're Team 4A, or Charlie Cook's favorite group. We were given the task to create a game or some kind of media using Charlie Cook's favorite book as our basis, and we were given the theme Utopia. With this, we decided to create a card game called Realms of Eden. Realms of Eden is a digital based card game rather than a physical card game, as those are very popular at the moment. As we've gone for a more realistic style of card design, we've decided that the target audience we're aiming for is ages 13 and upwards, but the game itself is suitable for people of all ages. Sticking with the utopian theme rather than this game being about battling like most card games you see, like Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering, as a player, your aim is to gain control of the central capital city and unite the four realms, establishing a unified utopian civilization across the different islands. What this means is our game, rather than being about defeating your opponent, will be more of a strategical game where you build up resources. It'll be the first player to get to a certain point of development will be the one that wins and gains the capital city card to win the game. The story behind the game is that the factions of Eden once lived in a constant state of war and chaos in order to claim the power of the dragons and ascend to divinity. This left the world scarred, and the dragons went extinct. Civilization was ruined. Long time later, the civilizations learned from the past and learned to live in peace on their separate islands. Our card game story begins with the great dragon Eternum has returned, offering ascension to the one who can unite the realms under one banner and prove themselves capable of leading their people into a new age. In the Realms of Eden, there are four different factions. There is the Followers of Light, which is the human faction. Their symbol is the sun, and they are united under the way of the light. They stand strong with their leader, Charlie Cook, and their god, Yon, the eternal light. We have the Atlanteans. They're the dwellers of the sea, their symbol being two water droplets. These creatures have said to been missing for centuries and come back now to heal the wounds of Eden after the Great Wars, and that is why they seek the dragon's power. We have the Valkyrie tribes. They're sentient beastmen and sort of anthropomorphic animal kinds. They settle in the deserts of Eden. They're led by the Father and believe that everyone deserves to live in a free, fair world, no matter your background or where you come from. And finally, we have the Ancients. They are forest dryads, spirits, and pixies. They live in the forest and they seek to heal the land, reverting Eden back to its natural times when it was flourishing wildlife and such.
The premise of the game is to gain power for your faction and help them become the most progressive civilization within the realm. The player must achieve this by playing land cards, artifact cards, sorcery cards, and unit cards. The player starts with 3 land cards already on the board, as well as 9 cards in hand, randomly drawn from their deck, and draws 2 extra each round. The player wins when their opponents have no land cards left. Land cards, as well as acting as the Persuado hit point system of the game, also act as the mana points. Each land card played adds a certain amount of mana to your total, which you can spend on other cards. Mana is refreshed on your turn. Once these cards are removed from the board, however, they are gone for good. Artifact cards grant you permanent bonuses as long as they remain on the board. Sorcery cards are single-use cards that have special effects when played. Unit cards are cards that can be used to defend and attack lands. They have special effects of their own, similar to artifact cards. Each card has a faith value and a will value. Each faction also has a special hero card. These hero cards are powerful, expensive unit cards that give an ultimate way to win the game, and are usually the leader of the faction. Combat is simple, and does not focus on violence, to keep it in check with the utopian theme. Units can target land cards to remove them from the opponent. If the unit is targeting a defended land, they challenge the defending unit instead. If their faith value exceeds their opponent's will value, they win the challenge. If a unit loses a challenge, they return to the bottom of the opponent's deck, and the opponent has to draw them again to return them in play. You can also use units to defend your land cards.
Liked having the visuals of the cards laid out and then an image within the cards. so I went with that for my marketing design. With my marketing art, I researched into lots of different places where you can find marketing via pop-up ads on apps to Facebook, sponsors and promotions, and on YouTube advertisements. To make these seem more realistic, I went in and I changed all the text within the marketing art that I had found and made it look like this was real advertisement for our app game. In the Facebook advertisements, I use phrases like "Can you unite the realms?", which is our catchphrase slogan for the game, and "Play now", available to download on all app stores, to make it seem more realistic. I also included narrative that we have for our game in the bigger advertisement on Facebook, just to give people a background and get immersed in the story of our game.
We decided early on that each faction would be related to the characters and locations from the short segments in Charlie Cook's favourite book. These factions are civilizations that each occupy their own floating island. As you can see from the map, the islands of the Realms of Eden are each distinct lands with a design that reflects their occupants. To the north, the ancients dwell in dense forests and jungles, making their homes in the huge trees that grow amongst the tall rock pillars. Their designs are based on primal nature spirits from folklore, like sprites or dryads. To the east lies the realms of the Followers of Light, whose city lies in the centre of a great plain, never shaded from the sun. The city is surrounded by fields of crops who grow in the warm sunlight of the realms. To the south is the realm of the Atlanteans. A deep ocean is contained within their floating land. Beneath its surface, the Atlanteans have built a vast civilization amongst the coral and underwater caves. And finally, to the west is the desert of the Valkyrie. The scattered desert monuments reflect their nomadic nature. They find peace in the calm of the desert wind and are powerful healers. Their inspiration came from a variety of desert cultures, such as that of the Egyptians, but also from Native American cultures and their cliff dwellings, so their environment reflects these influences. In the centre of the map is the capital, which acts as a central hub for the other factions, a sort of common ground, and is a towering tiered city of marble inspired by classical architecture.
Eden's capital is a religious capital where all the main leaders from all four factions come together to unite and rejoice in the freedom that they have found. Around Eden's capital, you will find lurking Eternum, the last and only dragon left. With the design of the capital, I heavily referenced utopian themes to really push the grandeur of the city. I heavily focused on the silhouette, so for the map design it could be very recognisable. I also wanted it to look like it was a religious place of worship that all the faction leaders could come to worship. The dragon Eternum is the only dragon left, and I wanted to keep its silhouette relatively peaceful with the themes. In the past, the dragons had been violent, but this dragon in particular, I wanted to have a very blue, sort of utopian, peaceful and almost playful themes within it. The dragon card is in reference to the dragon in Charlie Cook's favourite book. He features as also a non-violent dragon with a playful nature. At the same time, I also wanted the dragon to feel like it was something of power because it's a special card along with the capital.
The Followers of Light are the human faction. They're deeply religious and they worship the sun as the one true deity, as it brings light to the realms and nourishment for all living creatures. They believe that through worship of the sun, they can unite the other factions. When we were designing the human faction, they were inspired by a mix of kind of the cleric and paladin character archetypes, but adapted to the utopian theme. So when we were kind of drawing their architecture and their environment, we were looking at a lot of like Christian religious items. That's kind of where the book, being this like big bound manuscript, came from. And obviously the architecture. In terms of gameplay, they rely heavily on faith within the game mechanics of the card game.
So the first character I designed for the human faction is the Speaker. This is his card and artwork. He is based off Charlie Cook himself in the book. Originally, he was going to be a king, but we decided more of a utopian setting. It would make sense to have more of a peaceful kind of character rather than a ruler. So we went for the Speaker, as Charlie Cook himself is the one who reads the first book, which all the stories are enveloped in. It makes sense to have him be the one to take the leader role and read the book, spreading the word of the followers of Light's god.
I really focused on making this silhouette interesting so you could see it on the map design, and on top of that we've got the sun icon which Anton designed for us in the centre of the two pillars.
For the Followers of Light sorcery card, I looked at what the human faction-based narrative is being. Humans held by their faith in the light and their gods, and what look and feel we wanted the Followers of Light to have in-game. Also look at our base story, Charlie Cook's favourite book. The humans throughout this story and books within each other had a consistent colour palette of rich colours and being in a rich environment, or being rich themselves. This held well when creating the sorcery card to represent the human faction with strong colours both representing rich in our world but also consistent with the utopian well-off society would look like in a fantasy game, clean, with gold, blues, whites, purples, using these colours in the sorcery card to represent the faction well, and any player within the game can see what faction the sorcery card comes from.
The artifact I designed for the Followers of Light is the Speaker's lockbox. As the Speaker would be going around carrying the Light Scripture often, he'd need some kind of protective case to keep it in, to keep it clean and safe. So this artifact card is based around that. It's a special box that would keep it safe, keep it covered, and that's why the card's effect itself is based around protection.
I had the idea for the moving shrine when I saw in Gwent, which is the Witcher card game, they had the kind of siege weapons, and obviously we're going for something utopian, so you can't necessarily have siege weapons, but I kind of liked the idea of a kind of some sort of vehicle that a faction would bring forth. And so I thought of the human faction and them being religious, decided on the idea of having a moving shrine. And so the moving shrine is it's sort of brought forth by the Followers of Light on their missions to spread their religion. It's got all kind of holy texts and different kind of holy items, holy water, things like that within sort of inside it. And it's even got a bell, a kind of belfry to call the faithful to prayer. So it fills that niche of a kind of vehicle or siege weapon in the card game, but with a peaceful or religious twist.
The Atlanteans are a mysterious and sophisticated faction of sea dwellers. They prefer to live in solitude and rarely interact with other factions. These creatures are some of Eden's oldest, and they are well known by outsiders for their ability to create extremely rare and powerful artifacts. Their architecture is also noteworthy, with large, sprawling underwater temples and palaces housing their people. The Atlanteans seek to use the power of the dragon to heal Eden's scars. The inspiration for this faction came from the Rowena character in the book.
This is Naros. This is the Atlantic character card that Anton produced for us. He has got an extension at the moment, so for his work this is what we've got at the moment. He is the leader of the water faction, and he is very heavily powered and has very strong stacked abilities. In terms of narrative, he's a hugely respected character within the realms and holds a lot of powers. Anton's character and the Atlantean faction as a whole is reference to the pirate section of Charlie Cook's favourite book.
This card is the Atlantean Temple. This is the primary main land card for the Atlantean faction. The design of the temple shows the temple kind of hidden away in like an underwater chasm. The idea of them being hidden away for centuries. This is why. So this is their temple. This is, once you got it on the field, this is your primary main source of mana points for spending on other cards and artifacts that you'd put down.
The Atlantean Sorcery card. We wanted this piece to be different from the other factions. Being in line with how the Atlanteans are an underwater faction, I chose to look at designs for more waterproof or at least semi-protective ways to contain writing. With this in mind, we ended up picking a scroll concealing the parchment inside to protect it more from the water erosion than damage, since it has a strong magic inside keeping it dry and protecting it while being underwater. But this leads for a more realistic and grounded design for players to see the sorcery card and believe this faction could use it and keep it protected underwater. The sorcery card overflowing scroll in-game will, when played, making all Atlantean cards unable to drop below 3/3, keeping the sorcery cards as a strong, impactful card within the game as it represents the faction to such a degree. The Atlanteans Artifact card. This piece was inspired by the visuals in Charlie Cook's favourite book. When the pirate finds the book with all the treasures, there is jewelry all around him on the floor. This led me to use jewelry for the Atlanteans card and having a strong link to the original story. I wanted to capture the fantasy and the magic of the Atlanteans within the artifact card, so I added a magical ruby to the center that can control the currents and waves and water shown by the water flowing around the necklace, and it is important to the Atlantean faction with how strongly they're represented by water.
This is Anton's card back for the Atlantean faction. It references very much underwater themes. It keeps very peaceful vibes. He's even got copper marks on watermarks on the outside edge of the card, as well as little clam mussel-like creatures that are clinging on. This card back will be the back of all of the Atlantean Water faction cards.
The Valkyrie tribes are individual tribes of sentient and civilized beasts who roam the deserts of Eden. They prefer to live a free, nomadic lifestyle and are constantly on the move. Whilst they may seem intimidating to outsiders, the Valkyrie are actually a cultured and peaceful group who seek knowledge and wisdom above all else. They are stark believers of karma, and outsiders can expect to be greeted with offers of a full belly and a warm bed. The deserts may be harsh, but the people are not, and have learned from the past. The Father is an ursine creature who dwells in the deserts of Eden, a renowned and glorious leader of the Valkyrie people. He uses the blessing of the desert to heal and provide for his tribe. He's a bear-like healer, based off of Daddy Bear from the Goldilocks section of Charlie Cook's favourite book. The Father is a hero card, and his in-game effect allows him to summon his tribesmen to the board, as well as power them up for as long as they remain on the board. His armour is gold and ornate to show his sophistication. However, I also chose to give him a long-worn cape, as I believe this makes him look more wise and intellectual, almost like a scholar or monk. This is my land card for the Valkyrie faction. It is one of the many oasis springs scattered across the deserts of Eden, which grant weary travellers a place to rest and access fresh water. I have also chosen to add a small campsite to show how the Valkyrie tribes choose to live.
The Valkyrie Tablets is the Valkyrie's sorcery card. It's a set of 2 ancient stone tablets that are sort of bound with a metal, intricately carved kind of gold binding. The tablet is kind of meant to contain the collected wisdom of generations of Valkyrie tribals. And when I was designing it, I wanted it to stand out and be unique and kind of be distinct as a book or a kind of text compared to the other factions' books. So I thought a stone tablet was perfect for that. And it was also quite fitting because obviously something being made of stone is very hard wearing and would survive the harsh desert environment of the Valkyrie. And I made sure that the gold trim on the binding matched the armour engraving as seen on the character design of the Father.
The Ancients. A forest consists of forest dryads, spirits, and sprites. Their goal as the spirits of the forest is to seek to pacify the land, reverting Eden to its natural form, and in turn creating a flourished wildlife for Eden. The Ancients live surrounded by wildlife, very much a faction that keeps themselves until Eden needs them, living off what Eden and its magic provides for them deep in the heart of the forest. The Ancients' environment consists of dense forest, flowing rivers, towering mountains, where dryad spirits and sprites all live with an abundance of other wildlife and magical creatures.
Evergo is the leader of the Ancients faction. She is almost like a Mother Nature-like character, and she has lots of spirit sprite-like followers. She herself is a dryad. She doesn't appear to have many abilities in the cards, but they stack as the game goes on, making her quite powerful later on in the game. Evergo and the Ancients faction is reference to the creatures that you see on the very last page of Charlie Cook's favourite book, that are green and forest-like elf creatures.
This card is the Pink Hummingfly one I designed, not to be like the other cards that have more of involvement in the story, such as the Dryad, but this is more of a early use cheap card that you would get on the field near the beginning of the game. This was just an example to show some of the more basic cards that may be in the sets.
The Ancients. This environment is one of the most important things to the faction since Eden's itself. With this I wanted to represent not just the life that is in the environment, but also how it is very much alive and moving as the player is playing the game in the background. The environment was also taken a lot of influence from the base material of Charlie Cook's favourite book, since throughout there is a lot of nature, creatures and wildlife interacting and helping the story move forward. For the card in-game, it would be another land card, giving the players more mana, in turn letting them play more cards throughout the game.
The Tome of the Ancient Glade was the first book that I started designing, and I sort of designed it alongside George, and we decided at that point that it would be good as a kind of visual tie-in for all of the different books, for the books to have these two distinct kind of leather, straps or bindings. But of course, I decided that the Tome of the Ancient Glade would be this kind of ancient living book, and it contains all of the kind of knowledge of these interconnected creatures within the forest. And, for it to be this living creature almost, that it should have like a strong visual language. So everything in the, on the book is like a natural material. And so the bindings on the book are roots, and I think that works really well because it kind of creates this idea that, you wouldn't even necessarily be able to open the book without it letting you and without it like releasing itself open. Kind of the idea that it wouldn't open unless you were sort of worthy to read it.
The Branch of Yora is a healing staff crafted from one of the world trees in the ancient forest. The branch is imbued with the healing properties that the world tree is famous for, and is fabled to have the ability to cure any ailment. However, each use of the staff also causes it to fracture and dissipate slightly more. I have portrayed this in the piece by making the branch seem splintered, as well as making its in-game effect a one-time use.
This is another one of Anton's card back. There would have been, or there will be, 4 card backs for each of the 4 factions. This is based off the forest and has elements of thorns and wood textures, including a lily in the middle to make reference to the book design we have for this faction. This is the UI design for our digital app-based card game. It features all the cards and elements like a full screen expansion button that takes you to a screen where you can see all your cards. It has the smaller icons for sorcery and artifact cards in the lower corners, which will give you a notification once you've received one of those cards. It also has a point counter system, 2 in-game currencies, all the 4 factions, iconography, and I have also designed a victory and defeat page that features in with it. On top of that, if you click on any of the cards in your hand, the card will pop full screen, and if you then swipe upwards, it will play that card against your opponents. Thank you for listening. This has been Charlie Cook's favourite team. We hope you enjoyed the project.